At this time, we will start the debate with Honorable Deputy Premier, Minister of Health, Carvin Malone.
I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for affording me the opportunity to lend my voice to this very important debate. It may be lost on some, but this House convened this session on Thursday, the 28th of May, last month. And here we are 192 days later and 192 hours later and trying to get through the very first matter. I will ask your indulgence in reading from notes from time to time, if you may, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt says that there comes a time in the affairs of men when they must prepare to defend not their homes alone, but the tenets of faith and humanity on which their churches, their governments, and the very foundations are set. The defense of religion, of democracy, and of good faith among nations is all the same fight. To save one, we must now make up our minds to save all. I have expressed my displeasure and the fallacy of playing any sport invented by others with rules and guidelines known only to the inventor of the sport and expect to win. In spite of the utterance of 3 legal advices sought and distributed by you, Mr. Speaker, I am still challenged to determine and/or appreciate the intent of the resolution, which states in part to reprimand the governor for violating Section 22 of the Audit Act 2003 and obstructing the duties of the Council of Assembly under 47.3 of the Virgin Islands Constitution Order 2007. A few questions. Does the resolution seek to discipline the holder of the post of governor? Does it seek to bring into disrepute the office of the governor? Does it seem to highlight in members' propensity to challenge whether or not the actions of the governor can be challenged, or merely to establish the location of each banana tree in the vineyard behind which members are seeking to hide? Mr. Speaker, in another forum, I marveled at the many ways and emotions the 2 simple English words, look out, can effect. Look out can be an invitation to experience the grandeur of spectacular views from a set location. The shout of look out can save an unsuspecting person from the venomous strike of a snake lurking in the grass. The warning signs of look out can signal an imminent attack of someone who has wronged you or that you have wronged. And finally, but not exhaustively, The jubilant songs of "Look Out" can draw one's attention to the fashionable apparel worn and displayed by the honorable member of the 6th District on this, her date of birth, her birthday, and greetings, in fact, are thus in order. Look out. The resolution resulting from the placement of item 4A, Roman numeral 20, which is now deemed to be late. But even the word late is relative. Mr. Speaker, the word late is relative. I like to go to the root of any issue in order to determine how strong the branches will be. Since the suspension of our Constitution in 1901, I think it was, and the reinstatement in 1950, the Virgin Islands have gone through constitutional reviews in 1954. We have a new constitution, say 54, one in 67, one in 77, and the other of which we are under, the order of 2007. So 13 years later, we in fact are due for constitutional review. In fact, the period, if you can see, 54 to 67, it was 13 years before that review occurred. And in 67, you would know that we had the ministerial system of government that came into effect, 1967. Mr. Speaker, we are limited in our ability to speak of the very document that caused this resolution to be researched and a motion placed. And the item, as I said, item 4.1, or 4A, Roman numeral 20, the Office of the Attorney General, the Auditor General's report on government's financing of BV Airways direct flight to Miami. Suffice to say that this episode started from in 2013. It was brought back to light in 2014. It came into effect 2015, and from in 2016, it had its issues. The very same persons we are asking for advice on this, and the persons that, quote unquote, laid the report on the table, I will read for you, or into the record, a press release, or portions of it, that was issued on Monday, the 22nd of June, 2018, 10:41. This is a government press release. The appointment was made by, it says Audit Department. Topics were internal audit, and the date, 22nd January 2018. It stated that the appointment of Mrs. Sonia Webster was made by His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Augustus Jasper, acting in accordance with Section 92 of the Virgin Islands Constitution and with the advice of the Public Service Commission. It states that the Office of Auditor General and its function are provided in the Virgin Islands Constitution Order 2007. In this, I skip one paragraph, I go to another. Ms. Webster will audit government accounts produced by the Treasury Department and inquire into and audit the financial records of government departments and ministries plus statutory bodies and trusts. She will evaluate compliance with financial legislations and regulations, provide assistance and advice to accounting officers in departments on their accounting and control systems in order to improve processes across government, prepare various reports and memoranda, and as required, to ensure information agreed is being shared and reported on, and act as an advisory body of the Public Account Committee. She was appointed in this instance on Monday, 22nd January 2018. Don't miss the dates. I'm coming back to it. Ms. Webster served as Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer with the Alliance Accounting BVI and Alliance Management Consultants from July 2016 to January 2018. I'll read that again. Don't miss the dates. I'm coming back to it. Ms. Webster served in a company from July 2016 to January 2018. She served as Office of Auditor General, Government of the Virgin Islands, at various periods from July 1988 through November 2015, having served as Assistant Auditor, Senior Auditor, Deputy Chief Auditor, and Auditor General, where she managed the BVI Government Audit Office. Those dates are important because we got to get to the root of where we are. I was looking at, I didn't determine as yet, but who was the Attorney General at this time of her service? I believe, may be wrong, it was the Honorable Attorney General Baba Aziz at the same time. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. Why are those dates important? We had an event which we're talking about late, went sour. Well, it was reintroduced in 2015. At the same time, it so happened that there were some disputes in terms of exactly whether or not these should continue. Advice was sought and received from the records from the very Auditor General, which seemed not to have been in favor with the government of the day. I can say no more of this because this is an area that has been much written about. Late has its relevance. Late has to be placed in perspective to what we have. So here we are, 2015. Well, it was introduced from 2013, shut down. Reintroduced in 2014, built up. Debated and advised about, because some of the very same persons who held the post of directors were then invited to the board. And we have, I can't remember whether it was a dismissal or voluntary removal from the office of Auditor General. That happened in 2016, I think it was, that we said. Okay? So now, we had the storms, and this is what the thesis. So this here takes me off my thesis for a little while. Well, we have some big issues to deal with, Mr. Speaker. Very big issues to deal with. This resolution takes it off track for a minute. Well, 192 hours later. For a minute. In time. In a blimp of time. Because when we look at the fact that the very item that could arguably could have caused the removal of the Auditor General is now being laid by the Auditor General of the same person. Advice is being sought from the very AG of the same person. So we have to put these things into perspective. And this is why I'm accused of doing a lot of research, a lot of reading, because I like to go to the root to see how strong the branches are. So we had very devastating events that followed. You must admit, we were coming out of the floods of 2010. We had the floods of August 2017. And we had the hurricanes of September 2017. It is the topic of which the thesis is based. So I wouldn't go much deep into that part of it. Suffice to say that we had written to and requested approval for loans. First, grants, which we were informed, well, grants would not be given, but we'll give you guarantees to get loans so that you can fund your recovery. And I've held up this document so often that I know of what it says. A document signed on 23rd April 2012 speaks of the protocols for effective financial management. The document entitled a high-level framework for UK support to BVI recovery, hurricane recovery, speaks of the protocol for effective financial management. But under the section of good governance, after it outlined all of the infractions and the various items that must form part of the high-level framework, it says that amongst others measures here must also include the following. The date is important. As required by the Audit Act 2003, BVI government to appoint a permanent Auditor General by 1st April 2018. The date is important. The announcement, the press release says that the appointment was made on January 22nd, 2018 of Miss Sonia M. Webster, for she had served before from July 1988 to November 2015. Took a break over there, went into her own practice, I so believe, from July 16th to January 2018, and immediately was engaged, or re-engaged, as the auditor on 22nd January 2018. This directive came on the 24th of November 2017, and it was acted upon a month and days later, on the 22nd of January. Well, 2 days short of 2 months, 22nd of January 2018. Just to complete that one line, it says, as required by Section 109 of the BVI Constitution, steps must be taken to ensure the timely auditing of government accounts on an annual basis, bringing all previous year's accounts up to date. I have invited members of the public to get this 24th November 2017 document, get the high-level framework of which forms a part of this document, the high-level framework for UK support to BVI hurricane recovery. It speaks volumes of our particular accountability, transparency, and good governance. I read from it the other day the areas on fiscal sustainability, building in resilience, public administration reform, and the UK BVI partnership. It says that the UK government commits to developing a joint and harmonious technical assistance strategy that will be aligned to the BVI recovery plan. This strategy will cover technical support in public administration reform and support to the delivery system of the investments of delivery agencies. It also speaks of a partnership agreement, of which we would look at as part of this. And as we have previously discussed, the UK government will need to set conditions around such support to ensure that this represents value for money and that the additional borrowing is sustainable for the BVI. Therefore, I recommend that our officials begin discussion to develop a partnership agreement between the UK government and the BVI government in the margins of the upcoming joint ministerial council meeting. Mr. Speaker, from January of 2016, the honorable member, the mover of this resolution, mover of this motion, he have stated the many times that he have questioned the very report. I don't know if he enlisted all of the times, but I know that he enlisted many of them. He didn't seek to, nor did he enlist the many times that the then leader of the opposition, Honorable Premier today, questioned the many actions of the very report. It was questioned over and over and over and over, to the point where there were calls for elections to be called forthwith, immediately, because there seemed not to be anyone who could, at the time, credibly go to the UK to negotiate for and on behalf of BVI, seemingly. Those are very important words. Is it not, AG? Seemingly? Non-committal. It doesn't have any statement of fact in seemingly. But what it does have is the fact that there seem to have been a number of activities surrounding this. And when called upon to give their input, the Honorable Premier in his submittal opined about the fact that very little was offered by the other members of the opposition. They went into every item save for the substantive parts of what the resolution called for. I wonder why. I really have to wonder why. The fact is that when you read through the document, Mr. Speaker, you need not wonder anymore. Where are the lessons learned as a result of the transactions? Because if we have, in spite we do have, 10 members, 9 members, that were returned to the last House of Assembly for the very first time. So when you look through the records and you see the number of items that should have been flagged since the entering into agreement on the 23rd of April 2012, one need not wonder why much couldn't have been said. Mr. Speaker, most people, including myself, remark only of the ratios and how to avoid going into violation of the ratios that are set out in this document, the protocols for effective financial management. However, Mr. Speaker, there are other areas that speaks of how projects should come to the House, how they should be evaluated, how they should be monitored, and how they should be explained and audited in this public face. One would have to determine for themselves whether it was the intention to adhere to the document for which UK officials were eaten out of legislators' hands. We got all that we wanted. Maybe that's wrong. We got as much as we could get. They were eaten out of our hands. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the very document and you take into account the Public Finance Management Act, the Enhanced Act, the Public Debt Act, the Constitution of the Virgin Islands, and all of the tenets of accountability and transparency and good governance, and you reach to 24th November 2017, and even to a letter that was authored by the Economic Secretary to the Treasury on the 21st of August 2019, which states that the thresholds set in the Protocol for Effective Financial Management concerning the three borrowing ratios cannot be revisited. They demonstrate the government of the Virgin Islands' commitment to macroeconomically sound and fiscally sustainable policies. However, if your government's analysis show that it will breach the borrowing guidelines, the UK government would consider proposals by the government of the Virgin Islands for a date to return to compliance, and the famous words, alongside interim targets and appropriate mechanisms to demonstrate sound public financial management. The questions asked since the 26th of February 2019 to today is, what are these interim targets and appropriate mechanism? Mr. Speaker, you would see why I have said that we have a lot of big fishes in this lake that must be addressed. And we don't want, because I think Attorney General will be agreeing with me that says that there are rules against double jeopardy. You cannot be looked into twice for the same action. So I don't want a reprimand that have caused us to be here 192 hours to miss the substantive facts of the thesis that is being investigated. I don't want it to happen. We called an emergency session to deal with control and suppression so that the persons beginning to return home on the 2nd of June could have distinct guidelines as to their movement and performance immediately upon arrival. Here we are, 192 hours on the, what date is today? The 5th? The 5th of June, and we haven't gotten there yet. Maybe today. Maybe today. So, Mr. Speaker, you would see that one cannot major in minor issues. It was stated, and I did not know it was so troubling, when the words of a tri-party came out. It was a big debate here. Big debate. Wasn't intended to be, but it was a big debate. Why should it be? If we had a coalition government over here, we'll call it a coalition government. A government of dual party is a coalition government. When certain committees are being formed, each member or the members from each of the three parties dictate that they must be represented on that body. Three parties, one each from the particular members. I didn't think they had any fight with the honorable member from the 4th. He wasn't fighting for it, so one from each party, and then you fill it in with the members from government based on the allowable numbers that we have. So I don't see what the big fuss about being deemed to be a tri-party opposition. But if that phraseology is troubling, I don't mind pulling it off the table. It's off. Her Majesty's loyal opposition. Now, when you look at the fact that we talked about and then tried to impute actions that were in effect from 2002 2003, 2004, nothing at all to do with the very substantive resolution brought by the member opposite from Her Majesty's loyal opposition. It was the mover of the motion, though he caught everyone by surprise, even his own members. It is one that could have been substantively debated, and it is only my view as to what substance really is, because we say look out could have many different meanings. So substantive could also have many different meanings. I've always invited people to look at the substance of what is said. Let's get to the root of any motion, any resolution, any bill that comes to the House in order to understand how strong the branches could be. We have a lot of substantive issues to deal with. There is a petition that was placed in the House. There were letters that were placed in the House, of which has to be or have to be addressed, because, Mr. Speaker, these are issues for which the population must be made aware of. They must stay tuned to. And what I am always comforted, and my late mother would always tell you, that once I, your at-large representative, have given all of the advice that is afforded to me and have given all of the details of which I can give, I am the perfect example of knowing how to stand still and see the salvation. I could only say to people what I know. So if it is called on me to research, to impart the particular topics of which I speak, I try to do it as accurately as possible so that we will know. We have troubling days ahead of us. I asked the Permanent Secretary, and I will do this if and when we ever reach to the substantive reason for which we are here in this session. We have another one that we might run into, but we will see how that works. Mr. Speaker, as we indeed welcome our people back home, we were looking in terms of, well, what numbers that we have. So I asked for the numbers. We have 498 registrations thus far of persons seeking to come back home. 118 of those approved for home quarantine. 27 persons will be returned between the 3rd and 4th of June. 14 persons expected today, 12 on Saturday, 15 on Sunday, all subject to clearance from public health. And the Control and Suppression Act is intended to help guide these persons, because we have taken active steps, which you'll hear about soon, if and when we get to the main reason for which we're here. So I don't want to major in the minor anymore. Let's get on with this, and the very action, because I know that the mover of the motion, the mover of the resolution, has not let up in making the public fully aware that we have some issues of which we have to deal with. The previous leader of the opposition have made the public fully aware that we have a number of issues of which we have to deal with. Mr. Speaker, I am making you fully aware that we have a, what's the word, whack? We have a whack of issues. We have quite a few issues of which we have to deal with as it relates to the protocols for effective financial management, as it relates to the Constitution of the Virgin Islands, as it relates to funding for recovery from catastrophic events. We had budgeted $375 million since that budget was passed. Historic, because we had two budgets in the same year. Our premier has more strength than I could imagine. I could not imagine one person could attend so many meetings. He makes me tired. But at the end of the day, the job has to get done. I told him, and he's working on it, we must get a Marshall Plan of action to get all of the accounts of the territory up to date. We cannot let 2020 go and 2019 accounts are not finished. So we must finish 18 and we must finish 17. 16 was done? Okay, 16 was done. So 17, 18, 19. I don't care whether it is cash basis, accrual basis, whatever basis it is. It's constitutional. It must happen. And I am putting on record again, we must get it done. Forget about converting from one to another. Figures don't lie. Whether it's cash or accrual, it will catch up with you. So we have to get it done. It's all historic data anyway. You can't change it save for doctoring it. And you cannot doctor it. So you have to present it. Cash, accrual, who cares? Mr. Speaker, I'm going to stop there because we have 498 applications. We have people that are already coming into the territory. We have people of whom our citizens are concerned about moving from areas that they should not have been. And we have to then get out from these hollowed walls into the area so that we can then put our actions in motion. Our people have responded and responded well. We cannot get weary in well-doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Premier Malone.